Noah Gragson expected to drive the 42 for pending GMS Motorsports in 2023, and Kyle Larson admits that it was a driver error in the crash between him and Ty Dillon at the Indy road course. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go and start off with Hyvee, as Hyvee announced that they are going to sponsor in 5 additional races for Bailey Curry this season. They already have sponsored him for Michigan, but they will sponsor him at Watkins Glen, Darlington, Kansas, Texas, and Phoenix. It's great to see the Hyvees getting involved with NASCAR a lot more. Of course, they sponsored Jack Harvey and IndyCar Series, and of course, they partnered up and really got Iowa back on track. So it may to see the Hyvee is going to continue their partnership with the company and the branding. Great to see for sure, and happy to see the Hyvee will continue their sponsorship and their branding in NASCAR. I think it's really awesome and great, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Michigan Speedway. As after the Cup Series race, it was announced that Michigan Speedway had their largest crowd at Michigan for the whole weekend since 2016, and the largest crowd for Cup race since 2016. The crowd looked really good in my opinion. Yes, it wasn't 100% full, but one thing you notice is that the infield camping is sold out for the first time in 10 years. And people showed up to Michigan, and we saw a really great race in my opinion. I think that's really is what's going to help this track go through. Since repaved, the racing has been terrible. I think, one, a lot of people wanted to be very intrigued to how the next gen car was going to race. And number two, I think the racing, like I said, was really solid. So great to see a lot of people show up to the track at Michigan Speedway. It's great for the series, in my opinion, and happy to see for sure that Michigan got a great crowd. I think it's really awesome and great, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Roger Carruth. As Roger Carruth was speaking to one of my good friends, Casey Campbell, and Roger told him that Roger Carruth has 4 races left with Alpha Prime Racing this season, that being Kansas, Las Vegas, Martinsville, and Phoenix. And then in the Truck Series, he's got 3 races left with Spire, that being Richmond, Bristol, and Phoenix. So Roger, of course, will be behind the wheel of the 7 Spire truck for 3 more races here. And then, of course, he had 4 races left with Alpha Prime Racing. It's good to see that Roger's getting a few more starts. His last start, of course, earlier this year coming at Pocono. We know what happened there early in the race. But it's good to see that Roger's getting a little more experience in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He's running more than we initially thought he was going to run. And then, of course, he's got 3 races in the Spire truck, a truck that has been capable of winning, and Roger did have a top 10 potential finish at Worldwide Technology Raceway. So it's good to see Roger's getting more experience. I would not be surprised or shocked if Roger does go full-time with Spire next year in the Camping World Truck Series. But it's good to see Roger getting more experience, and happy that he will be behind the wheel at least for a few more races. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jordan Anderson Racing. As Jordan Anderson Racing was speaking to the media, and Jordan Anderson says that we will see 2 entries a few more times this year in 2022, with him by the wheel of the second car. And the goal for next year is to have 2 full-time Jordan Anderson Racing cars in the Xfinity Series on the racetrack. That is a goal for next year. Of course, for the first time, I believe, in the team's history, they fielded a second entry. Now, unfortunately, because Jordan Anderson spun out in the NASCAR Xfinity Series qualifying, he was not able to make the show. So we'll see this a couple more times. I think probably most of the playoffs are probably going to end up seeing 2 entries on the racetrack at once attempt to qualify. I think it's amazing to see for sure that we'll see 2 Jordan Anderson Racing cars. Of course, they've got a lot more chassis this time around. They only had 5 coming in this year. Now they've got 21 chassis. So they've got a lot of chassis for sure. And in all honesty, in all seriousness, it's great to see and happy to see. We're going to see them a few more times with multiple entries. Really awesome, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Xfinity Series. As there's a couple major important notes that have come out, and Chris and I brought up a couple very interesting nuggets going on in the Xfinity Series. Kevin Cowboy Starlin announced that he is expected to retire at the end of the 2022 season from crew chiefing duties. And Brandon Jones is going to do double duty at Watkins Glen, running a Joe Gibbs Racing car or KBM car at the ARCA race, and also running for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series as well. Let's start with Cowboy Starlin. Cowboy Starlin has been a crew chief for RSS Racing for a very long time, but he's also been a crew chief for many years. So the retirement, in my opinion, is well deserved. He's done amazing so far in his career, and I think he absolutely deserves a great retirement. Then going to Brandon Jones. Brandon Jones, of course, I believe he did double duty last year, drove for the team in the ARCA Series last year, so it's not a surprise, and he's done this a couple times this year, and I think that Brandon Jones will be a threat to win for sure. The 81 car has been generally fast every time it's been out on track. In fact, Brandon Jones did get a win in the 81 car, I believe, at Charlotte earlier this year. So I do believe that Brandon will be a threat to win for sure. And those are some pretty interesting nuggets heading into the weekend. And those are some pretty good things and more fun things that came out they're going to see here in a couple of weeks. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace had another fantastic run this past weekend at Michigan. But instead of being very, very happy about finishing second, Bubba Wallace was really, really bad himself and was disappointed finishing second. He kind of called out Ford during his post-race interview, but he said he doubted, basically let everybody down and was really, really angry with himself. Now, I want to say this for Bubba. Bubba, I understand him being really hard on himself. He's a guy that's been showing a lot of pace and has got a lot of pressure on his shoulders. But I also at the same time don't 100% understand him putting himself down like this. Bubba Wallace has been performing exceptionally well. Bubba Wallace has had 4 straight races where he's finished in the top 10, and 3 out of the last 5 races, those have been top 5 races. He's been doing so good, and he's only had 1 finish outside the top 15 since we got back from the break. This 23 team has been showing so much more promise and so much more speed. I've been saying this all year. Got his first career Cup Series pole and led a lot of laps, like 21 laps in a race. And I think outside of a couple drivers, there weren't a lot of drivers that led a majority of laps in the race. And I just think Bubba Wallace, I understand him be hard on himself. He has a lot to prove. He's got the weight on his shoulders, but he's been doing so good here recently that I just think that he's got to kind of take it easy. You've got all the world on his shoulders, but I think that you're going to win a race here before the end of the playoffs. I really think right now that I would not be surprised if Bubba Wallace wins for the playoffs. He's performing so good and so great that I think he could win before the playoffs. Bubba, keep your head up, man. You've got a shot to get it done, and I think you got a shot to make the playoffs and before the playoffs even start. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Ricciardo. Now, we already talked about this on the channel in regards to the Daniel Ricciardo situation, but Daniel Ricciardo is not expected to return to McLaren in 2023, and Oscar Piastri is expected to take his place heading into the 2023 season. And according to the article that Adam Stern reported on, that Chris Medlin originally reported, Daniel Ricciardo is not interested in a full-time switch to IndyCar, as he is not a fan of racing on ovals, and he's reiterated this a couple times. I really don't see a problem with this. Some people just are not a big fan of running ovals. Max Verstappen, our driver, is not a big fan of basically running IndyCar and not a big fan of the ovals as well. And maybe he wants to run, he said he really doesn't want to run the Indy 500. Because there's been people talk about maybe Daniel Ricciardo could go to the 3rd McLaren car because we don't know who's going to get behind the wheel of that 3rd McLaren car. Well, I think Daniel Ricciardo is a big fan of road courses. Now, what happens to Daniel Ricciardo? Because, again, he's expected to be out of his contract with Oscar Piastri. Well, I think there's a couple options. One, he could go, of course, run for another Formula One team. A team like Haas, a team like Alpine, which I think would be definitely interesting. Go back to Renault, which used to be years ago, and get behind the wheel of that. Or maybe, just maybe, he could come over to NASCAR and run that Project 91 car, or could run a Junior Motorsports car. Basically, Daniel Ricciardo has said in the past that he is a big fan of Dale Jr. and the Earnhardt family. I think it'd be great if he came over to NASCAR and drove the Project 91 car, or drove for basically drove for Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series. Not on a full-time basis because he's not a big fan of ovals, but maybe on a road course. I really feel for Daniel Ricciardo in a situation, but again, his performances just have not been there, and I think that's why they're going ahead and replacing him. So it's interesting to see for sure that he's not a big fan of ovals, but at the same token, at the same time, I've got no problem with him saying this because, again, he's not a big fan of ovals, and you have to respect his decision-making, in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain. Now, Ross Chastain was being interviewed before the weekend started, and Ross Chastain says he met with NASCAR after the race in Indy to explain what his move was. Basically, his move was legal, and asked what basically he did. Now, he basically said that he did not do it intentionally. Basically said that it wasn't, he had an opportunity to go right and basically did it to basically avoid a potential collision. Now, let's talk about Ross Chastain, his move. So Ross Chastain, of course, made a move, and it was a very questionable move because a lot of drivers basically were talking about this after the race. Guys like Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin saying that what Chastain did, basically, he exposed the system on making the move. And the more I think about it, he kind of did expose the system. However, there was a rule before the weekend began. I remember in the media, basically he said that maybe they could have given it in the basically for the green flag drop and basically the driver introductions, or basically telling them or driver before the race, the drivers meeting before the race, which they really don't have. But the drivers were basically saying something for the weekend, and I think that was off the limits. Now, Ross Chastain, of course, He's trying to be as aggressive as possible. And he's trying to go out there and, win a race. And again, Chastain is trying to get as many wins as possible. But again, Chastain also has to understand that he's got a lot of pressure because, again, he's been super, super aggressive, putting a lot of work into it. That being said, though, I understand Ross Chastain's frustration. He basically said that his move he thought was going to be legal. He thought it was a legit move. Basically said that he met with the right people and said that he wanted to make that move to try to go for the win. Now, if he would have won the race, I would have really been upset because Chastain basically did not deserve to win, in my opinion. Ty Reddick did have the fastest car. But I understand Chastain making that move, in my opinion. Chastain's been super fast, and he's had a fast car overall, in my opinion. I think Chastain could have won the race if he not for the mistake, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Music City Grand Prix. Now, the Music City Grand Prix that happened yesterday while the Cup Series race was going on was absolutely chaotic. There were, I think 7 or 8 cautions in this race. It came down to one lap straight up between Scott Dixon and Scott McLaughlin. Scott Dixon already had suffered damage earlier in the race, was holding out probably the fastest car on track, that being Scott McLaughlin. But Scott Dixon would come off the final corner, basically a near photo finish, and he would win the race at the Music City Grand Prix. Just like last year's race, this race was absolutely chaotic. And of course, we were kind of in hurry-up mode because of the weather and inclement weather, and they almost thought they were going to get all the laps in. Luckily, they were able to get everything finished, but man, a lot of cautions in this race, a lot of crazy strategies. And like I said, Scott Dixon now has surpassed Mario Andretti on the all-time win list as the second winningest driver in IndyCar. Got a second career win, his second win of 2022. And now Scott Dixon has a legit chance at winning the championship. He is now only 6 points behind, I believe, Will Power or Marcus Ericsson. No, Will Power in the championship right now with 3 races to go. And there are 7 drivers who have a mathematical chance to win the championship with 3 races left to go. So this championship is definitely heating up, in my opinion. I think it's going to be really fun to watch what happens for the rest of the season because, man, this has been such an incredible year for sure when it comes to racing IndyCar. And we've got 7 drivers who could have a legit chance to win the championship at season's end. I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I'm excited to see what happens as we get closer to the end of this championship, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Tony Stewart. Now, Tony Stewart put out a tweet on Friday evening. It had hashtag NASCAR and hashtag IndyCar. Now, it seems like Tony Stewart may be teasing something. He basically talked about he's got something really cool for the fans that is basically coming. Now, it's something that I think really revolves around IndyCar. Now, when I saw this, I was very intrigued to see what exactly it is. Now, I was not able to get any information on the situation in regards to what Tony Stewart is basically doing. But I do believe, in my opinion, that this is something that's really, really cool. Whatever they're doing, I think it's great. Maybe Tony Stewart's going to buy up AJ Foyt Racing. I know people have been talking about potential for Tony Stewart maybe buy AJ Foyt Racing. That's very possible. Is Tony Stewart going to run an IndyCar race next year? Basically, is going to run an IndyCar team next year. That is a very big possible thing. Or is Tony Stewart basically going to join a broadcast IndyCar? That's a very, very big possibility. But whatever Tony Stewart is doing, I'm definitely all for it because I want to see Tony Stewart do something in IndyCar once again. Because the last time Tony Stewart competed in IndyCar, whether as an owner or basically a driver, was back in 2001. And I think it would be pretty cool and pretty awesome if Tony Stewart would race. Maybe he's bringing new manufacturer in the sport. Maybe he's talking to bringing maybe Honda back to NASCAR. That's a very big possibility. Or maybe Tony Stewart's basically getting to the IndyCar Hall of Fame, and maybe he's working on trying to get the IndyCar Hall of Fame up for grabs. That's one thing to be determined and one thing to watch. But in all honesty and all seriousness, I think whatever Tony Stewart does, I'm definitely for it and definitely supportive of it. And we'll see what happens when it comes to Tony Stewart and whatever those big plans are that he's going to have. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2023 IMSA schedule. As it was revealed on Friday, the 2023 IMSA schedule, as it's the first major motorsport series, I believe, to announce their schedule. So the season is going to kick off the Daytona 24 Hours on January 26th to the 29th weekend, followed by Sebring is race number 2 for the Sebring 12 Hours and the Sebring 1,000-mile race for the WEC Series. That'll be on March 15th to 18th. Then we will go to Long Beach on April 14th to 15th for, I believe, the 2-hour and 40-minute race. Then we'll go to Laguna Seca on May 12th to 14th, followed by Detroit as we go back on the streets of Detroit, the regular streets, on June 2nd to 3rd. That will, of course, be during the IndyCar weekend as well. Then we'll go to Watkins Glen for the 6-hour race at Salem at the Glen from June 22nd to 25th weekend, followed by Canadian Tire on July 7th to 9th. Then we'll go to Lime Rock on July 21st to 22nd, followed by Road America on August 4th through 6th. Then we'll go to Virginia on August 25th through 27th. Then we will go to Indianapolis for the first time in nearly 10 years. We'll be going back to Indianapolis from September 15th to 17th. And then the final race will be the Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta, the 10-hour race at Road Atlanta that will take place on October 11th through the 14th. I am so pumped and so excited for this next year's IMSA schedule. A lot of great tracks under, of course. One track you notice that's not on there is Mid-Ohio, and that is being placed by Indianapolis when they go back to the Indy road course for the first time in a very, very long time. I do think this year's IMSA schedule is a really, really strong schedule, in my opinion, and I'm definitely looking forward to see what they've got coming up in store for IMSA. I think next year's IMSA Championship is going to be great. Of course, you've got that new LMDH program that's coming, the new LMDH, the top class of series racing, and there's just so many good things going on in the world of IMSA right now, and I think the future of IMSA is extremely promising. You've got new manufacturers coming in, and some manufacturers leaving, but you got some new ones coming in as well. I think it's going to be great to see so many new faces and so many new places going into next year. And I'm definitely looking forward to the IMSA schedule heading in next year. I think it's going to be extremely fun, extremely exciting for the fans going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin and Kurt Busch. Now, Denny Hamlin was being spoken to the media around Kurt Busch and what is going on with Kurt Busch. And Denny Hamlin said that Kurt Busch is working with the same doctors Dale Jr. did and is hopeful that Kurt Busch will be able to return at Richmond. Kurt Busch, of course, has been out for the last 3 races due to concussion protocols, and Kurt has said he's hoping to be back here this weekend at Richmond. Now, I think there's a good chance he does come back at Richmond. But again, Kurt Busch has been basically following what the doctor was saying. We've been seeing Kurt Busch basically go to basic games. He's been doing some kart racing from what we heard. And also it was basically at a Charlotte FC game and was out there trying to get into large crowds as well, which is the same thing that Dale Jr. went through. And Kurt Busch, like I said, is hopeful, like I mentioned, that he will be able to return at Richmond, which compared to a track like Michigan, which is a very high speed and high profile track, basically this track is a much slower track, unless, of course, you really hit the outside wall hard, which could really, really hurt you, like Kurt Busch. This is a track where basically you can probably give a little bit more give and not potentially really hurt yourself a lot more than you have in the past. Now, going into a situation with Kurt Busch, there's a couple questions I have. Number one, if Kurt Busch does not return by the time we get to the playoffs, what happens? Will he not make the playoffs? That's one thing to watch. The other big question is, will Kurt Busch have the same performance as he did before the concussion happens? Because for whatever reason, sometimes when you have these injuries, you're not the same. Sterling Marlin's a perfect example. Sterling Marlin was a championship contender in 2002, comes back in 2003, he's never the same. Steve Park, same situation, was really becoming a definitely good underdog for a rookie. They basically underdog for top 10 in points, had that massive accident in 2001, and then basically was never the same when he came back, and it's happened for a lot of drivers, including Dale Jr. Drivers don't seem the same. So is he going to be able to perform to the same level that he had at the beginning of the year or not? That's one thing to watch. Or will he not even come back at all for the rest of this next couple of weeks, and then Ty Gibbs continue to substitute for him? Because I'm saying this, Ty Gibbs got a top 10 in this car and performed extremely well, ran top 5, led a couple laps in the race. Ty Gibbs was really, really impressive. And I really want Kurt Busch to be back this week, and I hope it happens. So we'll definitely wait to see what happens for sure. But it seems like we're going to be waiting to see what happens in regards to the situation, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, Kevin Harvick was being spoken to the media this past weekend. Now, Kevin Harvick had already talked about the issues with the safety on the car. And Kevin Harvick says that he met with NASCAR he basically says he has concerns of the energy dissipating in a crash and drivers taking too much of a hit. And basically said that he has not spoken to really NASCAR about this, but he said this is not on NASCAR's top priority. This is nothing new. He's talking about the safety of these next-gen cars and how there's been kind of somewhat of a lack of the safety of these cars. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, it seems like this year's car, compared to the last generation of car, these drivers are taking a more brunt of the hit because these cars are super stiff, which means that you can continue these races more likely and fix the cars a lot more. But what's going on is that the energy, they've done a little bit less give up on the car, but there is not as much of give in the car, and the drivers are taking a more brunt force of the hit than they used to in the old Gen 6 car. In the Gen 6 car, you wouldn't take as big of a hit. Well, basically because of how stiff the car is, the drivers are taking more of a hit. We've seen drivers complaining more about headaches this year. We saw basically drivers like Christopher Bell, who's under the age of 30 years old, complaining about this. Drivers like Joey Logano, Austin Dillon, Bubba Wallace, another driver. And that's a big concern because we've got young drivers under the age of 30 years old who are generally complaining about having headaches after races. This is not a good thing, and what Kevin Harvick is saying, this needs to become a top priority. Now, this is something that NASCAR is not going to be able to address and fix until after the season's over. We're too far in the season right now for NASCAR to make major changes. But what I would expect is, one, they're going to have a little bit more give up on these cars. Not excessive give up, but they just need a little bit more give up because these cars have been generally over the years have been safe. And I think one thing that NASCAR generally prioritized over the years is safety. And I don't think NASCAR is ignorant. I think they know the drivers have been more and more concerned about it, but it's not their number one priority. Their big priority is trying to make the racing as good as possible. But I think that when it comes to safety, I think that needs to be more of a priority, in my opinion, than basically the racing itself. Don't get me wrong, I think the racing is so important, but I do honestly think another thing that needs to be important is that basically the car needs to be safe so our drivers are not getting hurt, and we do not want careers cut short. We don't want drivers under 30 years old and guys like Chris Hyvee who have potential to be Hall of Famers and champions of our sport. We don't want guys under the age of 30 complaining about this, and we don't want careers being cut short and careers being cut early, in my opinion. So this definitely needs to become a top priority in NASCAR's world. They need to get this as a big priority for sure. Now, I understand that NASCAR wants to make the racing great. I totally get that. This car has provided great racing. There's been so many good races this year, but we got drivers complaining about safety of this car, and they need to basically find a way to address some of these hits. Now, to the Kurt Busch situation, Kurt Busch has suffered a lot more hits in a row consecutively, which is why the concussion, I think, happened. But I do think the drivers are feeling the more brunt of the hit, and the more wrecks get involved, the more likely you're going to have a situation like Kurt, and especially for a guy like Kurt, who is in his 40s, it's probably going to have more of an effect. That being said, though, I do believe that NASCAR needs to find a way to address the situation long term and fix some of these issues, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Marco Andretti. As Marco Andretti announced yesterday that he'll be making his NASCAR debut, in fact, his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut later this year, and will drive the 48 for Big Machine Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the Charlotte Roval. Of course, Marco Andretti, who is the grandson of Mario Andretti and the son of Mario Andretti, Michael Andretti, basically one of the greatest drivers in IndyCar as well. Marco Andretti, over the last year or two, has been really carving a path in the world of racing and has been extremely successful in the series of the SRX and won the SRX championship. And he has been in talks and conversation with teams about making starts in NASCAR. He's already, in fact, we already talked about this last year. Mark at one point was talking about running for Stewart Racing this year, but it seems like that deal never really came to fruition. But when we think of Marco Andretti, he is a driver that has really performed in the last year or two. He wasn't fantastic in the world of IndyCar. He did get a couple wins there, but wasn't great. But he's really rejuvenating himself and has gotten that confidence back that he's been really wanting. And now he gets an opportunity to race in NASCAR. Now, what are my overall expectations? One, I don't think he really tested a car. He needs to basically go out there and test a car, which I think NASCAR will probably allow a test for Marco Andretti to have the opportunity, unless he has tested in the NASCAR Cup Series, NASCAR Xfinity Series car before. But if Marco does well, which I think this car is capable, as we've seen a 48 car contend for top 10s and top 15s, that would be impressive in his debut. But I think Marco's goal is just get some laps completed. Just go out there and do well, because I love the fact that Marco Andretti is coming into the world of NASCAR. We have seen such a major open wheel invasion come into sport. We've got guys like Santino Ferrucci, Marco Andretti, drivers over the years like James Davison. We've got Kimi Räikkönen coming over the year. We've got other drivers like Marcus Ericsson who's interested. Jimmy Johnson looking to come back to NASCAR. We're seeing a big open wheel invasion in NASCAR once again. Marco Andretti is one of the faces that's part of that major open wheel invasion. So I think this is amazing and very awesome to see. And like I said, I'm super excited to see that Marco Andretti is basically coming back. I think it's generally just super great and super awesome to see. So really great to see, in my opinion, and very happy to see that Marco Andretti will be making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. I think it's going to be doing really good. And again, I'm super pumped and super excited to see Daly in the world of racing and back in NASCAR. I've been wanting this for a long time and so excited to see that Marco Andretti will be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut in October at the Roval, and might make more racing starts in the 48 car here in the future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's video, as we're talking about Kyle Larson and him finally giving an update on what happened at the Indy road course. Now, we've been tracking the story over the last couple of days in regards to the crash. For those who watched Indy road course race around 20 laps ago, we saw a very nasty and scary wreck. In fact, probably one of the scariest wrecks we've seen so far in the next-gen era. Kyle Larson, we all thought, had a potential brake problem on the car because he just completely drove straight and clipped Ty Dillon and had a massive wreck, and Kyle Larson went to check up on him. Now, Hendrick Motorsports came out a few days later and said that Kyle Larson made a driver error and made a mistake, which to many of us at the time thought that really did not make sense. And NASCAR said this too, which again did not really make any sense to me at the time. Then on, I believe, Thursday or Friday, we discussed this, that we got some S&T data backing up the situation, saying that Kyle Larson did have something. He broke 200 feet more than the previous lap, and it was doing really good. Now, Kyle Larson spoke to me in the situation and basically spoke in what happened at Indy. And he says that he made a mistake at Indy and said it was a driver error at the Indy road course. And said after he checked up on Ty Dillon to make sure that Ty Dillon was okay. Ty Dillon did say, basically said that Kyle Larson, he says he made a mistake. Larson didn't. Basically, Ty Dillon said, we all make mistakes. It happens, and basically that Larson says that Larson made a mistake, and Ty Dillon said he was sore and didn't basically lose that soreness until the end of the week. Kyle Larson also said that basically he got a bruise on, I think, his foot, but he was able to recover from that. Now, I don't want to call BS or nothing on the situation, because if it is really a driver error, which I think is a really good possibility that it is a driver error, then that is a really, really bad driver error for Kyle Larson, because Kyle Larson, of course, is a fantastic driver. But I am a little skeptical and a little suspicious on this for a couple reasons, and I'm going to explain why. Number one, take a look at the interview. Kyle Larson's body language. Kyle Larson was not looking straight to me. When we see Kyle Larson, he generally looks at the media and basically answers questions. Unless he is a little bit distracted from time to time, which again is very possible. But Kyle Larson was a body language just did not look fantastic. I think that Hendrick is covering something up, and I think it's very possible NASCAR, I don't think NASCAR is covering something up, but I think Hendrick might be covering up that they were testing a brake package, and maybe they were doing something that NASCAR did not like. Because here's the problem I have here. Well, yes, that's a mistake, and every driver can make a mistake. That was a really, really bad mistake from Kyle Larson. And I just don't see Kyle Larson really ever making a major mistake like that. And let's also not forget that he already had damage from a crash of Eric Almirola early in the race. So maybe the brakes ended up boiling up. But if he says he made a mistake, we just have to take what he said. But at least Kyle Larson finally came and admitted. But here's one thing I really don't find weird too. Why did it take Larson a week to say something? Why couldn't he speak to the media on what happened in the race? He basically got told by his team to basically come by then and speak to his team. Something does not add up here, because if he says he admitted that he made a mistake 6 days later, then he should have been able to say it to the media legitimately, because they said there was something wrong, because he said he had brakes after the situation happened. What I don't get and don't understand, in all honesty and all seriousness, what I really do not understand is how it took Larson almost a week to speak to the media. This is something that should have been basically been able to get through much quicker and much sooner, and should not have taken as long as it did, in my opinion. So again, I don't understand why it took so long for Larson to basically come out and say something. It's a little weird to me and a little bit suspicious. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, if Larson did make a mistake, which I think there's potential that he made somewhat of a mistake, he tried to avoid and basically not cause a much worse threat, because if he doesn't hit Ty Dillon or even get in the sent house, I think Larson could have gotten seriously hurt or seriously injured. It could have been out for the rest of the season. That's just the truth. He's lucky that he didn't basically have a season-ending injury. But again, something just does not seem to add up for me. And I've been saying this earlier since this incident happened. Something does not sit right with me. And a lot of NASCAR fans, even though they're saying that and maybe what happened was he maybe hit the clutch instead of the brakes, which is very, very possible. He could have done that, which again, hitting the clutch instead of brakes, that's a pretty big mistake in my opinion, which he might have been able to hit the clutch instead of the brakes. But in my opinion, something is a little bit fishy in the situation. I just don't entirely trust what Kyle Larson is saying. I think something was wrong with the car, but maybe he did make a mistake. He says that he made a driver error at the Indy road course. So we think he made a mistake, and it was a driver error on his part. That's what he said when he spoke to the media. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Noah Gragson. Now, we talked kind of about this on Friday on the channel, but I completely forgot to really go in depth about this. As according to that article we talked about on Friday on the channel, Noah Gragson is expected to drive the 42 for Petty GMS Motorsports heading into the 2023 season. Now, it has been rumored for the last couple weeks that Noah Gragson will be going into the 42 car for Petty GMS Motorsports. There is an announcement that is coming here in the next couple days that is expected to make it happen. Now, we kind of haven't really didn't talk much about this, but Noah Gragson at one time a couple weeks ago, he had said that he was interested in returning to Junior Motorsports and staying in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But I guess things have changed over the last couple days because look at Noah Gragson the last 2 weeks. Noah Gragson, I know that he had issues at Road America, but Noah Gragson, generally, in all seriousness and all honesty, Noah Gragson has been generally really, really fast. You look at Gragson, he's got 3 wins so far in the Xfinity Series. He's in the top 5 at points. Had a pretty good run going in the Cup race with the 16 team, but had major issues. And I think one thing that's really helping Noah Gragson, he's got that sponsorship and money from Bass Pro Shops that would probably be helping him out. And, of course, other companies like Chevy Accessories that would be willing to help him out as well in there. Now, let's talk about career trajectory and career moves. Now, is this a great move for Noah Gragson long term? That is a very big question because the 42 car right now sits 30th in points. Meanwhile, Eric Jones, who's in the 43 car, has basically 17th in the points. I think, 8 top 10s and some top 5s so far this season, and has been generally really, really fast. He's gotten 2 or 3 top 5s and 8 top 10s so far this year, so he's been much more consistent than that 42 car that's only scored 2 top 10s. Now, one thing to be noticed, no disrespect Ty Dillon, but I believe that Noah Gragson is a better driver than Ty Dillon currently. So I think Gragson would do a lot better. But I would not expect Noah Gragson to win races next year, except at super speedways. I just don't think that 42 car is going to be capable. Now, one thing that could happen, which I think could be very controversial, one thing that I could definitely see happening is a potential crew chief swap going into next year, where Dave Ellens leaves Eric Jones, perhaps, and goes over and works with Noah Gragson because they used to work together in Xfinity. I don't know if that'll happen, but that could be a very big possible option for him. But I think Dave Ellens has been a big part in what's been helping Eric Jones out. So maybe they swap next year with crew chiefs. I don't think that should happen, but it could be a possibility of something. Or Jeremy Donnelly, who I think is also very inexperienced as well, may go there. But maybe Luke Lambert goes up with him. Maybe Jeremy Donnelly loses the crew chief role. Maybe Luke Lambert goes up with Noah Gragson. But I think Noah Gragson's been wanting to go to Cup. He has been reiterating this over this year, that Noah Gragson has said that he's been wanting to go over Cup racing really since basically around the time he won Talladega. He's been saying, I want to go Cup racing. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, and my goal is to get up to the Cup Series and race in the Cup Series. So, again, it's not entirely a shock or surprise. Now, I think we all thought he was going to go to College Racing because College Racing, of course, we don't know if they're going to be having 2 full-time cars or 1 full-time car, and then that second car being a rotation car. It's unclear at the moment that's going to happen. We all thought Gragson was going to be going there. Instead of Ty Dillon leaving, he opens up the potential of the 42 car. Now, what are my expectations for Noah Gragson heading into next season, with him probably going to the 42 car? Well, one of my expectations for Noah Gragson is that Gragson, I think, will get some more top 10s than Ty Dillon. I think Noah Gragson, like I said, no disrespect Ty Dillon, but I think Noah Gragson is generally a much better driver than Ty Dillon currently at this moment right now. But also, I think Noah Gragson will be more contending, at least for some more wins, than Ty Dillon generally has been. Again, I just think right now Noah Gragson has a little bit more of a complete package right now than Ty Dillon does currently at the moment. And again, I just think Noah Gragson will do better. I think Noah Gragson won't be, I don't think Noah Gragson will be at the level that Eric Jones has been at this year. Again, I think Eric Jones generally this year, he's had a really good year for this car. And I think Eric Jones is really just building toward next year with a multi-year extension. Now, I think also Noah Gragson's trying to get into this because he potentially could be a candidate for the 8 car heading into 2024 perhaps, because Petty GMS, of course, they have a pretty big association with RCR. It is a very big possibility that if Gragson does well, he could become a potential candidate for the 8 car long term. But if this is true, he's going to the 42, I think Gragson will do well in this car. In my opinion, will do much better than Ty Dillon has in this car, in my honest opinion. We're just going to be waiting to see what happens. I think Gragson will do solid, but he is expected to get behind the wheel of the 42 car for Petty GMS in 2023. So anyway, that is going to be for today's Lawn NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. In the description below for that. Comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think that Noah Gragson will officially be going to Petty GMS or not? Let me know in the comments below. And do you think that Kyle Larson really made a mistake or not? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to have race picks for the upcoming race at Richmond, as we've only got 3 races left till we reach the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. Then on Wednesday, we should have another NASCAR news video discussing all the NASCAR news there. Then we'll have more videos on the way. Thursday, I might have a silly season update coming, but just make sure you turn your notifications on to get ready for that. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.